for this tutorial, we are going to be looking at different graphics that you can make in Canva to really help your podcast stand out. And the first thing that we're going to talk about is podcast artwork. So the podcast artwork is literally the cover that people see when they go onto Apple Podcasts. You can see I've just gone onto Apple Podcasts, The Confident CEO, and this is the artwork there. But equally, if you go to, if we go to the charts, for example, all these are different examples of podcast cover artwork. And what I'd really encourage you to do before you create or even start the creation process is really consider to you, what is the vibe of your podcast? So you can see here that these particular, you've got the Wandery Red-Handed one here, the Diary of a CEO, they're quite almost like dark and moody, which, could set the tone there. But equally this one here, I'm guessing straight from the off that this is more comedy because it looks a lot more light-hearted. And again, the newsagents is much more kind of corporate looking. So I'd really consider to yourself, again, if we just go through some more, this is very tongue-in-cheek. I like the therapy couch, very easy listening. So again, it's, the cover reflects that. And again, here it's help. It's making you kind of think, what's going on here? But again, it's quite tongue-in-cheek. So you've really got to think to yourself, how do you want people to feel when they first see your podcast? What kind of vibe do you want to be giving off? Because there's no point, in my opinion, having a very serious business show and then having a cover like this. But equally, I don't think that a cover like this would necessarily suit the therapy crowd. By the way, if you haven't listened to it, it's a very funny podcast. But that aside, what we're going to do is we're going to go across to Canva. You can see loads of things that I've got going on here, and I am going to create a new design, and I'm going to type in podcast, and it will see straight away it comes up. I don't know why menopause podcast cover, that's an interesting one, but it comes straight up with podcast. So I'm going to click on that, and it's going to take me through to a 3000 by 3000 pixel square, which is an ideal size for your podcast cover when you submit it to the directory, as we did in the Buzzsprout tutorial. This is the ideal size for all of the podcast directories. You don't want to go smaller, because then what will happen is the directory runs the risk of trying to stretch the podcast artwork, and that's when it can start to become pixelated and not looking very professional. So I have got this set up here. What I would do as well is I would title it podcast cover, or whatever you want to title it, because otherwise when you download it, it will just be called untitled or new podcast cover or something. You want to title it with something so that when it's downloaded, it can be used from an SEO point of view. So if I was doing this for the Confident CEO podcast, I would do it like that, so then it's got that data, so then when it is being searched for on Google, for example, then this image could come up. But what I'm going to do next is come across to this section over here, and Canva's brilliant because there are so many templates included. You'll notice that there is a little crown and then Pro if you hover over it. If you don't have the Pro version of Canva, then yes, you can use these, but you will end up having to pay for certain elements within it. So if you're not using the Pro version, I would recommend you look for these ones, like that one for example, just for the ones without the crowns basically. But if you've got the Pro version, you can literally click and use anything. So what I would suggest you do is have a good look, scroll all the way down and have a look at all of the templates, and have a good think to yourself, as I said, about what it is that, the mood, the tone that you want to set. So, depending if you want something quite aesthetic, there's something quite there. If you want something a bit more lively, there's some examples, maybe more comedy or light-hearted, but it's whatever is fitting with your particular show. Now, I'm going to select this one, for example. I quite like this. So, what I'm going to do first of all is I'm actually going to change the font. Confident CEO. Let's make that way smaller. There we go. Confident CEO. I like that. And that is obviously not me. So let's find an image of me. I quite like this one for argument's sake. Now you can see here what it's done is it's got the background, and I don't want that. So I've already clicked on the photo. I'm going to click edit photo. And this is a pro feature, but I find it's totally worth its weight in gold. I'm going to click remove background. I'm going to double click on it just to make the whole thing a little bit smaller. And then I can also, make it a bit larger. There we go. So here I am, and I'm going to change that. My name is obviously not what I had written in. I'm not an author, so we can change that. I don't actually like these clouds, so I'm going to get rid of them. That's fine. And let's turn it to the pink, which is the confidence CEO. Move that maybe. You get the point. You can have a good play around with it. I don't think that looks bad for a first attempt and for 2 seconds of work. And then obviously you can change the fonts to match your particular branding there, for example. Once you are done, you're going to go over here and click share. Now, you're then going to go to download, and it has PNG suggested. I would keep this as a PNG because it is the highest quality that you're going to get. You can switch to a JPEG, but it will be a bit of a smaller file size. As I said, I would recommend just keeping it to PNG there. You don't want it to have a transparent background, so leave that unchecked because you want all this pink and everything in, or whatever your colour is. We don't want to compress it, we want to keep it at the high quality. And then I'm just going to press download. Once that's downloaded, I am then going to have that uploaded. And as I said, we cover that in the Buzzsprout tutorial. There is another thing which I'm going to show you within here, and I'm going to go across to my home page. You can see I create an awful lot here in Canva, and I'm going to go to my podcast. Now here, what I have are all of my templates for loads and loads and loads of my shows. You can see they just go on, and if you follow me on Instagram and on LinkedIn, you will be used to seeing these. Now, what I have got, I'll just open up both of them, is I have a template for my story. So this is a template which I've gone to stories and I've just typed in podcast, and that is where I found this particular template, and then I edited it. So you can see that, there's loads and loads of different options there, and then I edit it. So I've got my guest's picture in it. I've then got the title of the podcast. I say who is guesting, and then it's all branded in colours and what have you. And I download this particular one to my phone because for this size, this is ideal for Instagram stories. The other one which I have is my Instagram post. And again, I just found this template in the search Instagram post template. I just typed in podcast, and it was one of the templates which I found, and then I have just adjusted it to my branding and to my needs and what I like as well. So again, I've just got the image of the guest in. And by the way, if you haven't listened to this episode of the Confident CEO podcast, I would. It was absolutely amazing. I've said who's featuring in it, and again, I've got all of the details. And because it's going on Instagram or LinkedIn, I also just have my my handle in there as well. Now, for both of these, I actually just download these as JPEGs. It doesn't take up as much space on my phone, but again, that's preference if you want to download as a JPEG or a PNG. But I find that JPEG is an absolutely fine size. So I can go to share, download, and then I can change it to JPEG and then download. And the one for my story though, I tend to not bother downloading on my computer. I tend to just download it onto my phone. Now, what you can do from here is if you've got the pro version, you can actually schedule, and you can get that all linked up to your Instagram account or your LinkedIn, wherever you are sharing to. You can do that on here. Or if you have an external scheduler that you use, maybe you use Publer or Metricool, Content Studio, there's so many out there, you can then download and upload to your content scheduler. or you could schedule within Instagram. It's completely up to you. But that is very much what I use Canva for. As I said, it's for creating my artwork, it is for creating static Instagram posts like this, and it is also for creating stories. The other thing that you can do is you can use the template from your stories to also create a carousel post. You can then create additional posts. Say if you want to do a quote, let's come over here and we could type in quote, and if there was a really amazing quote from your podcast that you want to use, you can either do it over a carousel or a static post to advertise your podcast. What I would recommend doing when you have your quote in is right at the bottom that it was from your podcast. So say, you know, for this example, Sadie Hewlett on the Confident CEO podcast, because what that's going to do is entice people to want to listen to your podcast. Otherwise, if it's just a quote, people are going to be like, well, did you say that? Did someone else say that? Where do I find out more about this? Is it in a book? Is it on YouTube? So say that it's from your podcast. Hope you found this useful, and I will see you in the next video.